Welcome, my darlings, to my humble chateau. Please make yourself very comfortable. Relax your mind and release your imagination to me. I will bring you a story to entrance and entertain. Perhaps a frightening one. Perhaps a steampunk. Perhaps a bit of mythology. Anyway, sit back, enjoy, and subscribe to me. Hecate's New Preistess by MythologyLoves Horror. I love watching the puny mortals because their idiotic wars and drama-filled lives are a constant source of amusement for me. I've been around since before they achieved their first greatest historic moments, and I suspect I will be there long after their last. I've grown bored as of late, but I seem to have found my next distraction. At the moment, I have my eye on Cleo, a young mortal woman who just set foot in my long-abandoned shrine. The temple lies about an hour's walk from the village of Titana, and now the human is unknowingly at the mercy of my wrath. I flick my wrist, languidly summoning Zephyr, known to mortals as the West Wind, and command him to bring me to my ancient temple. I will punish the trespassing human, and it'll be so much more fun to do it directly. Cleo needed to hide, and I watched in amusement as she reasoned that the supposed haunted old shrine would keep her pursuers at bay. No one in the village had dared set foot on my sacred site in decades, out of fear of being cursed by vengeful spirits. But Cleo seemed to be more afraid of being burned alive for black magic than of any long-dead ghosts. The moment she stepped foot on my hallowed ground, a shiver racked her body, and, just for an instant, clearly written in her expression, I could tell that the mortal almost regretted her decision. As the weary woman began looking for shelter, I laughed. The sounds of the mob bellowing for her blood got louder and louder, and her horror was amusing. Angry shouts rang out, and the calls to find and burn the witch were starting to echo off the shrine's walls. I watched as the mortal looked around desperately, her wide eyes scanning for anywhere she could hide. Her gaze settled on the temple doors, and I could all but read her thoughts. Her mind said that even if they came this close, none of them would dare open the doorway to the shrine of such a dark deity. I watched as the woman ran up the once lovingly tended pathway, the thorns from the now wild black rose bushes tearing at her filthy chitin. She tried to open the bronze doors, but the heavy metal wouldn't budge. From far above, I cackled as her tugs became frantic, the vicious villagers drawing near to their hunt's end. The light from their torches was beginning to show through the gaps between the trees, and Cleo's terrified expression pleased me. I supposed I would let her live for now. Just when Cleo was about to give up, I ordered Zephyr to blow a massive gust of wind around her, causing the air to slide under the door and force it open from the inside. The woman didn't have time to marvel at the oddity of the situation, since finding a place to hide was much more important than inexplicable events. I apparated myself inside the temple, watching from behind her as the mortal slammed the temple doors shut. She made sure they weren't left open to give her position away. And for a second, I almost applauded her intelligence. Cleo was engulfed in total darkness, though I could see perfectly, and the moonlight was too weak to make it through the ceiling-level windows. She slowly began feeling her way along the wall, occasionally tripping over debris. I summarized that she was hoping to find another door, or at least something that she could hide in. But I wasn't going to make it easy for her. If she wanted to live, she would have to prove it. A few more excruciating minutes ticked by for the human, the only sound in the old shrine being Cleo's soft, bare footfalls. I wanted to keep my presence hidden, so I laughed silently as the mortal bumped her head against a tilted pillar. Without warning, she tripped over something large, and, after flailing around in a panic, Cleo blindly ran her hand over the massive object. Too bad mortals could not see in the dark. She quickly realized it was an old, rotting wooden cart. It had been used to bring offerings to my temple years ago. Now it was going to be repurposed as her hiding spot. Cleo crawled under the overturned wagon, the cloying scent of decay overwhelming her senses. I watched as her fingertips brushed across some brittle straw, and she felt at least 2 spider webs tickle her face. She doubted that her pursuers would follow her this far, but she appreciated the cover that the wagon offered. I was pleased to see that my newfound amusement was already grateful to me, even if she didn't know it yet. Cleo could faintly hear the shouts of the villagers in the distance, and she hunched into the furthest corner of the wagon as the braying of the hounds drew near. A half-hour passed, and I grinned in delight as the woman was beginning to believe she was safe. The hounds moved farther away, and she was just contemplating crawling out from under the cart when she heard voices. The unexpected noise was so loud after such long silence that she had to press her hands to her mouth to keep from screaming. I knew she could hear them, the 2 men who were trying to open the door, and her fear flamed my fun. She was hoping the heavy bronze would stick for them like it did for her. But Hermes and his luck weren't about to interrupt my fun. The metal screeched and a feeble light flooded through the crack in the old wagon. In the dim illumination, Cleo saw something horrifying. It wasn't straw she had touched. It was the dry, brittle hair of a dead man. Strands of it were all over her lap, and it took every ounce of her willpower to keep from scrambling away from the long-dead corpse. "I cannot see the witch in here. Let us be gone from this foul place." The villager's trembling voice carried clearly to Cleo, and I swore that I heard his knees knocking together. Another voice, this one outside the doorway, answered, "By gods, man, at least look around a little. The hounds were confused, but a few thought she came this way. so we must check here. She's but a slip of a lady. You should be able to apprehend her with ease." The scared man only grunted in response, his torch swinging wildly as he looked around. Cleo heard footsteps, and it sounded like the man outside had shoved the torchbearer further into the shrine. Stupid mortals. With how eager they always seemed to be to invoke the god's wrath. It was a miracle that their species had survived this long. I pulled my thoughts back to the scene before me as the torchlight grew brighter, and Cleo held her breath. She knew she was going to be stoned to death just because her neighbor was jealous of her wealth and status, and she would never get to have adventures or see the world. With each second, the light was revealing more of the wagon, and Cleo couldn't stop her tears from falling. As the man's footsteps drew closer, I watched Cleo tense her muscles. They would catch her, but I applauded her tenacity. She would never stop trying to get away from her would-be murderers, even when their arrows and swords would pierce her skin. Well, I couldn't let her die at this point. I snapped my fingers, borrowing a bit of my family's magic. Just as Cleo was about to dive forward, a hand halted her. She whipped her head around, and the corpse's face was barely an inch from her own. It put a mummy-like finger to its lips, and its right eye socket twitched as though winking. It began to crawl out from under the wagon as the woman watched in horror. "There she is! I've found the witch!" The man with the torch took a few steps closer, fully illuminating the crawling creature. He screamed when he got a good look at my creation, the light wavering crazily as he bolted for the door. "Foul creature! Return yourself to Hades and his damned realm!" The mortal's footsteps retreated. I could hear them screaming about how the temple was truly haunted as my necromantic servant chased them away. I sighed as Cleo stayed huddled under the wagon, her mind lost in one of those human panic states. She had always been taught that the gods were real, but this was the first time she'd ever seen such a display of one of our powers, and it seemed to have broken her slightly. I called out, my voice floating on the air to the mortal, making her head shoot up. She couldn't see anything in the now pitch-black room, so she sat perfectly still in case it was one of the villagers. I called again, my voice slightly less patient. "Rise, child. Come and pay your respects to me, Hecate, your divine savior." Soft, silvery moonlight flooded the temple. Cleo, too numb to muster any more fear, did as I bid her. She stumbled her way to far left corner of the room, where my dais sat, and on it was my ebony throne, with intricate floral detailing along the arms and headrest. In the shimmering light, the surface of it seemed to swirl, as though a miniature cosmos was trapped within it. Cleo's eyes took my visage in, and she saw me for the beautiful woman I appeared to be. I was reclining elegantly in my throne, my toga draped around me perfectly to reveal every curve and dimple. I'm the perfect dichotomy of black and white, with raven hair and alabaster robes covering my sun-kissed skin. My little mortal was delightfully awestruck. That was the most fun I have had in ages. I've not animated a corpse in many years. Cleo was still silent, and I took a moment to bask in the glory that is human reverence. She might have still been terrified, but that didn't make her wonderment any less appealing to me. I gestured for her to kneel. She did, and I was immediately pleased at how natural she seemed to obey my commands. Pretty mortals like you always look their best when in their proper place of reverence. Her body had responded before her mind could fully fathom what had happened, and I could see the puzzlement on her face. She knew I hadn't been there when she first arrived, and it was adorable watching her piece together who she was dealing with. Her knees touched the dusty, chilled stone, and the cold snapped her out of her stupor. She sounded almost self-righteous, something that I wasn't expecting from such a twig-like human. "What does a goddess want with me?" I didn't like her tone. In anger, I ordered Zephyr to chill her body until she was racked with shivers, her teeth chattering so loud that they could be heard throughout the temple. I didn't cease the punishment until she was subservient again, her new attitude much more mollifying. "I apologize, my goddess. How can I best serve you?" "Your undying servitude might suffice, as well as your soul. It has been far too long since I've had a shrine maiden to look after my little home away from home. And someone has to clean up the bodies in here." So quoth this raven. My darlings, I thought this would be a good story for Folklore Thursday. I hope you enjoyed it. Please let Mythology Loves Horror know, and give it a like. If you leave a comment, I will do my very best to comment back. Subscribe. Ring the little bell so you know when to come up and see me. And I will see you next time, my darlings. Bye-bye.